I mentioned. He's so smart and he can talk about anything. Hi, David. We were just talking about you.
You're very kind. Thank you.
He's really smart, but he has way too much headroom. Can you fix that?
I can fix that.
Thank you.
I've got this phone propped in a kind of device that maybe I'll just hold it like this.
Yeah. Okay. Whatever works for you. Thank you for
This,
doing this, David.
this
I
manual.
don't know if you just heard, I was talking to a lawyer from the
Yep.
Institute for Justice who's trying to help these US citizens who are being, arrested, thrown to the ground, pepper
Yep.
sprayed, detained. Um, and I thought it was interesting. He said in about 6 months, we're going to see a flood of lawsuits
Yep.
against the federal government. Just to kind of provide some connective tissue before we talk about what's happening in Venezuela. Are you as appalled by what you're seeing in terms of what these ICE agents are doing as I am?
Yeah. Look, I've always, as you know, I've always been on the border enforcement, more immigration restrictionist side. But I, as Mitt Romney, who argued for this in 2012, always insisted this is paperwork enforcement. Uh, it's that immigration is like enforcing laws against child labor. It's like enforcing laws against stealing wages and hours. It's like enforcing workplace safety rules. You don't do it at gunpoint. You do it with agents who arrive at the headquarters of the business with a warrant, ask to see the paperwork, review the paperwork, and if it's not right, if there are people there who don't have status, then they issue a citation, imposing a fine on the employer. And if you issue enough fines on enough employers, employers use legal labor, and that's the way. And these people are not dangerous. They're not committing a crime. They're breaking rules, but just like people who are just like workplace safety. It's not part of criminal law. It's part of labor standards law, and there's no reason to be shooting pepper spray in the faces of 3-year-olds, as apparently is happening. So, and what they're of course going to do along the way is completely discredit, if they haven't done so already, the idea that borders can be enforced in a way that is respectful, and that understands that, like, this many people coming to work in the United States at the same time, it's not a stable situation, but it's not a moral wrong. They're not harming Americans, except by the very fact of too many people coming too fast in too great numbers all at once.
But it seems to me there are a lot more rational and reasonable ways to deal with an immigration crisis than the way they're handling it now. But that's not what we're here to talk about, David. We're here to talk about Venezuela.
Well, the two are linked because, of course, Venezuela, under this terrible dictatorship, has sent a quarter of its people into exile, about 8 million people. The single largest um, refuge for those people is the country of Colombia, which used to be an American ally. Now, suddenly no longer. But many of them are in Mexico. Many of them are in the United States. That's been, along with the collapse of the Cuban economy, that's been the driver of this immigration surge that the United States has seen over the past half dozen years.
Can you give us a little more background on sort of uh, Venezuela? I think a lot of people are not necessarily up to date on their
Yeah,
Venezuelan history, and then we'll talk about like shooting all these boats and
yeah,
killing all these people and kind of Maduro and all that. Can you give us a quick cliff notes on
sure.
Venezuela?
I was in Venezuela once in 2010, and I've been following the country for a long time. So Venezuela is, of course, a big oil exporter, and it made a decisive turn to democracy in the 1950s, after a lot of instability in the past. And those oil revenues were used to build a substantial social safety net, an education system, great universities. I've had the pleasure and interest of visiting those universities. By 2010, they were in bad shape, but they had once obviously been impressive. And they built a substantial middle class. But like many South American countries, there are great social cleavages. And the previous a man named Hugo Chavez, who was an army officer, used those social cleavages to come to power in the 1990s. He attempted first in a coup d'etat. He failed, but then he came to power democratically, with the vote and support of people who felt disenfranchised by the old middle class Venezuela. He proceeded to wreck the economy. He died of cancer at an early age and was succeeded by Nicolas Maduro, who was his right hand man, who's even more of a thug than Chavez was, and even more economically incompetent, and even more of a thief of the country's oil wealth. And so that wealth is now inherited in the hands of a very, very few people, mostly in the military. And a country that was once a place where refugees from Europe went is now sending 8 million of its people into exile all over the world.
And the people of Venezuela are, by and large, are very much anti-Maduro.
At this point, Chavez, the first dictator, did have considerable popular support for a while, but at this point, the country is such a disaster that yes, Maduro is broadly unpopular, and he's broadly unpopular in all of South America because many countries are suffering the consequences um, of the instability that is caused when so many people leave. So the United States could have, if it had a rational Venezuela policy, could have partners. And at the head of the list of partners would be Colombia, with which the United States has worked so successfully against drugs, which is again a longstanding democracy, has a free U.S. Colombia free trade agreement negotiated by President W. Bush, signed by President Obama. Um, uh, if you buy flowers at Whole Foods, those are probably from Colombia. They're one of the biggest exporters of cut flowers in the world. We've helped them shift from drugs to flowers. But you need partners. And the Trump administration is contemplating some kind of military action without Congress and without partners.
All right, well, let's talk about that military action. I know that the U.S. has launched 21 known strikes on boats the administration claims were smuggling drugs. About 83 people have been killed. These operations are kind of happening. I mean, not necessarily under the radar, but definitely not with congressional authorization.
Yeah.
Um, and now there's a U.S. Naval carrier right on off the coast of Venezuela. So what what is the U.S. trying to do? What is their end game? And are they going to have boots on the ground in Venezuela? Can you help us understand what the goal is here?
I'll just relay what my Colombian and Venezuelan friends tell me because I won't pretend myself an expert, but I know people there and who have recently left. Venezuela is not a source of fentanyl, which is the drug that Americans are most upset about.
Fentanyl?
Yeah, it is not
Yeah.
a source of fentanyl. The drug that is being shipped or transshipped from Venezuela is cocaine. And just to give you an idea of how effective this how irrational and ineffective blowing up boats is, cocaine is the one price that Donald Trump has brought down. Cocaine retailed for 25% less than it did under President Biden. So that's like, so if you're looking for cheaper cocaine, more cocaine at lower prices, that's a big Trump success. But it tells you blowing up boats. Okay, so let's say every one of the boats he blew up was really carrying cocaine, which we don't know that that's true, but let's suppose it was true. How how many specks in the flow of cocaine are those boats? How much does it cost to have an aircraft carrier blowing up speedboats one by one as this deluge of cocaine makes its way north? It's obviously not working, or else cocaine would not be cheaper than it was at the beginning of the Trump administration. Um, and maybe not all the boats are carrying cocaine, and maybe not everybody on the boat is a drug trafficker, and maybe even if they all were, that summary execution without trial is not a punishment for drug traffickers in this country. And uh, it's and when it doesn't work, and it's not working because the price of cocaine is down. That's how you know your drug interdiction is working. Because the price of cocaine is down, you know that means they're going to be tempted to take the next step. And I think a lot of Americans think this is something to do with the fentanyl that is killing so many lives, and it is not. The fentanyl is mostly comes from Mexico, made there in factories out of chemicals imported from China.
So what is it about? Is it about oil? Is it about the fact that Venezuela is in our hemisphere and there's a new focus on Western Hemisphere foreign policy? Is it, regime change, as Jessica Fillion, who is one of my followers or subscribers, suggests? I mean, why?
Well, of all of the things, there could be any of the things you mentioned, plus just Trump's generally defiant, rule breaking attitude toward the world. But what it is not is regime change would mean um, uh, restoring Venezuelan democracy that was in place from the 50s to the 2000s, to the 1990s, really. And that would mean, and there's a democratic resistance in Venezuela, but that would mean a big that would be a big project to do that. You would need boots on the ground for that. You'd need support from the Colombians for sure. You'd need some sign off from other South American partners. You'd need some sign off from your European friends. And then you'd have to make a big intervention and have a plan for staging elections and bringing a civilian government to power. The Trump administration pretty obviously wants to replace Maduro with the next thug in line. Whatever you call it, that's not regime change. That's thug change, which is a very different thing. They want a more cooperative thug, and they're hoping they can do it by bombing Venezuela or by some kind of clandestine action. And that just doesn't usually work very often. If you want to change the regime, you have to actually have a vision of the new regime that you're going to bring to power, and then you have to have a big commitment. It's expensive, and you need friends.
You know, so many people voted for Trump, it seems to me, or one of the reasons they voted for Trump was because of his isolationist
Yeah.
tendencies. So, are you surprised that he is doing this, that he has set his sights on that? Do you think there's any world in which this is trying to provide a distraction from troubles at home? I mean, is it a wag the dog situation? Why?
Uh, We should never underestimate the importance of stupidity in Trump decision making. Just bad thinking, bad planning. I mean, I come from the interventionist wing of the Republican Party, and if there were a different president, a more responsible person who said Venezuela has suffered enough, and we are working with Colombia, with Brazil, with other South American friends, to end this dictatorship, restore the rightful winner. They have gone through the form of elections, and there is a rightful winner who had the election obviously stolen from him. There's this heroic woman who leads the democratic resistance who won the Nobel Prize. If they said we want to empower people like that, who pretty it looks like have the confidence of more Venezuelans than any other group, and we want the exiles to be able to go home, and we want to rebuild a middle class society in Venezuela. And Congress, and we've talked to Congress, and we know this will cost a little bit of money. But we got permission. We've made a case to the American people. This is a good use of American money. We've got the basic elements of doing a big thing, and you had a responsible. I personally would say, yeah, I'd be open to that idea. But this is just what they're planning is a coup, the next thug in line, and no change of regime, just a different dictator.
What else is on your mind, David, from these days? I'm going to be talking to Mark Kelly about what's happening on Capitol Hill and about all kinds of things. But gosh, so much news has happened this week. I'm curious, what is
Well,
your take on the whole Epstein file stuff? How, Trump did an about face and wanted these files, quote unquote, released. Do you think, David, we're going to learn anything from these files? Do you think that they're going to advance the story in any way, shape, or form?
not if Trump can do it. This is a case of you're about to be ridden out of town on a rail, so you grab the drum majorette's baton and announce that you're leading the parade. The goal here is to find a new way to do a cover up. What's interesting about this is that Trump doesn't normally do cover ups. Someone says, you punch that baby in the face. And he'll say, damn right. I'm proud of it. And the baby had it coming. And I'm glad I did it. And the Republicans in Congress say, yeah, we never had a position on this before, but now we're the punching babies in the face party.
But
This is a
also,
real,
by the way, I just wanted to say it also seems to me, David, that corruption, it's not corrupt if it's done out in the open.
well, if I'm going to put in a commercial for what I have been mostly working on. Unlike most journalists, I've not been working that much on the Epstein case. I've just had a big article in the Atlantic about the cryptocurrency industry and the so-called Genius Act that was adopted to promote the use of so-called stablecoins. And I won't take a lot of people's time now, but when the next financial crisis comes and people unravel why did it happen, that trail will lead back to Trump's Genius Act. And I have an article in the Atlantic explaining why this is going to be it is very corrupt, but this is not just the usual theft of taxpayer money. This is a setting in motion a gigantic financial crisis and a coming gigantic taxpayer bailout of the cryptocurrency industry. And in my opinion, it's a matter of when, not if, because what they've set in motion, the industry will fail. They've created conditions where the industry will fail and where it will be almost impossible for the United States to avoid bailing out the industry at a cost of hundreds of billions of dollars.
Someone just said they just read your piece this morning. Oops, sorry. And he wanted your reaction. Sorry. Did you see the thing about NVIDIA? It was a question about NVIDIA, and now I can't find it, David. But
What is this thought about the NVIDIA earnings report today?
what are your thoughts about the NVIDIA earnings report today?
I'm not current with that. That's a slightly different topic area of these advanced chips in the AI industry. I'm going to sink my teeth into that project soon, but right now I've been worrying very much about cryptocurrency and stablecoins, and I'm really. It doesn't go into effect till 2027. There's time to fix it, as best we can fix it, but we're on our way to something that could. You're going to hear more about this in the years to come, and anyway. I tried to publish a warning today.
Yeah, well, I want to read it. It's about the Genius Act. It's your latest piece in The Atlantic. David, always great to see you. Thanks so much for talking to us
Bye bye.
today, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon. And if not, have a great Thanksgiving. Although, are you in Canada?
I am right now in Washington D.C.
Oh,
and
okay.
and
All
we'll
right.
be celebrating Thanksgiving with my new granddaughter, our first grandchild.
Oh, congratulations. I'm so
Thank,
happy for you.
thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. All right. Bye, David.